Greetings and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. Oh, good. Folks, I'm not going to shoot too many more of these this morning. But you don't know how this goes. You try to do this, and if you're good, you can sit there, you can shoot them, and you can make, finally, a big one. Notice I was about half the distance closer now than I was earlier. You know how much of a challenge it can be to do that. Now, if you sit there and you stand there and you practice a lot, you can make a lot of those shots after a while. You can get there. You can do it. But sometimes you do need help. Sometimes you need someone that will come up and will adjust. For me, they would say, go play baseball or something. That's going to be easier for you than basketball. They might say, adjust your stance, bend your knees, kind of shoot a little bit better. It's about all I know about basketball and shooting is you do this kind of thing with your arms. So that, it's funny how, and you can get there, you can do that a little bit better. Now the trouble is that I don't always like being corrected like that. I'm not always a fan of that, especially depending on who it is that's trying to help me out. Sometimes I can think to myself, and I really especially hate this when they're right. I really don't like it when they're right. It's like, that they're right and I don't want to hear it, and then I'm actually doing better because of the instruction they give. That's a challenge. I don't like that. It is hard. And a lot of it is because we live in a society that still, even though we try not to teach these things, and we do this explicitly, we still live in a society that in many ways teaches us this. Teaches us these lessons that say, don't admit failure. Meaning that if you can't make it, that you just don't admit when you can't do something. Because if you do admit failure, then it's a waste of time. What have you been doing all this time when I spent all of that time practicing my shots to try and make something in there? You can't see where it went, so I made it because you can't see the evidence. Well, I'll try that. I don't know that that'll fly very well. Or we don't, we'd say, well, if I've been doing it wrong all this time, it's obviously been a waste of time. And not just that, if we admit that we have failed and we say it's been a waste of time, then maybe that obviously means that we are probably weak. And weakness is bad. We can't do any of these things. Even though we try not to teach these lessons anymore because we realize these are really bad lessons to teach, it still comes out and we still have to deal with this, because what it really means is that we're stuck in a rut. What it really means is that, I can sit there and I can practice this all day long, but if I continue to practice all of my shots like this, if I would have made that, I'd have been really impressed. And as I told the folks at the Eolia this morning, I said, someone out there probably would have said, if you can't do it twice, you can't do it at all. So, but if I kept doing that, I'm never going to get any better. But if I keep doing it, I'm going to be stuck in that rut. I'm not going to be able to get out of it. The challenge is, how do we get out of the rut? And that's where Jesus' ministry, as we see in the second chapter of Mark, this is still early in Mark's gospel, so Jesus is still early in his ministry, and he is confronting a couple of different groups of people. One that is in a rut. These are the religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees, or we would call them the legal experts. They are stuck in a rut. They have done things for a very long time in a very particular way, and they don't see any need to change. And even if they did see any need to change, they weren't going to do it because that just wasn't their thing. And Jesus is confronting them and saying, no, things are different. You've got to be different. But there's another group of folks that are listening. The hymn we're using throughout the series of Lent, Lord of the Dance, the second verse of that gives us these two groups. So we're going to play that. I'm going to invite you to sing along with that this morning. It's a familiar verse. We have sung these words many times before. What I want you to listen for are the two different groups of people that Jesus is working with and talking to and get described through this verse. So I invite you to join along in singing these words this morning. have these two different groups of people. On the one side, you've got the religious leaders and the experts and all those folks. On the other side, you've got the disciples, or you've got the folks that are willing to take a step out, that are willing to take a step out of this rut that they're in. And it's what I love about this story about the paralyzed man. You've got a bunch of folks that are involved in this story. Jesus has stopped and he is preaching and he is teaching in a home. And on the other hand, you have this group of friends who have a fifth friend who is paralyzed. And you can tell, you just know that they have done everything that they can to help him out, to find him some support or get him healed or do whatever. But there's nothing new that they can do. Anything they would do at this point would be something they have already done. They are, by definition, stuck in a rut. They can't get out. Except they hear that Jesus is teaching over in this other home, and they say, what's it going to hurt? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And so they pick their friend up and they go and they take him over to this house where Jesus is teaching. And then they get up there and they realize that there is no way that they are getting into that door because there's a huge crowd of people that are gathered around there. Now this might be where if you were really stuck, you would say, well, we tried. We didn't get very far. But we tried before we hit this roadblock. Well, they said, well, we aren't going to be stopped by having to do anything so traditional as use a door to get into a house. Instead, they climb up onto the roof of it. They make a hole in there. And can you imagine being that guy that's sitting underneath where they're starting to kind of pull that hook, thing that hits you on the top of the head? Like at first they're just like, whatever. Second one hits you, like, oh, what is that? And then about that time, this hole opens up on top of you, and they start lowering a guy down through that hole in the ceiling for Jesus to heal. These were folks that, they were going to try what they could to get out of that rut that they were in, to find a new way of doing things, and they were going to do what it took, even if it meant tearing a hole in someone's ceiling. I don't think it was Jesus' house they were in, and they were going to make this happen. And so they get in there, and now Jesus sees what's going on, and he knows what the other folks are thinking. He knows there are these religious leaders there who are stuck. And he hears them as they are muttering to themselves, saying, why does he speak this way? He's insulting God. Only the one God can forgive sins. Because part of Jesus' teaching was that the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Messiah, or as the common English translation of the Bible says, the human one, he can forgive sins. Jesus hears them and knows that this is what they're muttering because they are stuck in that one place and thinking, well, only God can do this. This is the only way that this can absolutely happen. And Jesus hears their muttering and knows that he might have a hard time getting them out of the rut that they're in. But there are all these other people that are gathered around inside and outside of this house, and it's those folks that he knows he can reach. We tell this story because of the great healing miracle that happens, but there is more to this story because Jesus is teaching this lesson to folks that are gathered around, and he's beginning to make a point on why you should follow him out of the rut that they were in. He recognized what they were discussing, and he says to them, and by virtue of that to everyone who is gathered around, why do you fill your minds with these questions? Which is easier to say to a paralyzed person, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your bed, and walk? But so you will know that the human one has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the man who was paralyzed, get up, take your mat, and go home. Jesus is giving not just healing to the man who was paralyzed, but giving a new path to all the folks that were gathered around, saying, you can get out of this rut that you're in. You don't have to stay stuck here. There is a way to get out. Listen to my voice, and when you listen to my voice, I will show you a new way to get out of this place that you are stuck in the middle of, but you got to do it. You got to work to get out of it. You've got to hear and you've got to follow, and you can't just keep getting stuck there. Because we are stuck in so many places. It could be just something as simple as just being stuck, without much basketball talent and not being able to make a shot except for every once in a while when I can do that. It could be just something as simple as that. When I was in college and I was in all of my music classes and everything else, one of the places where I got stuck in was that I didn't like to practice all that much. I spent enough time in rehearsal, I thought, why do I need to practice? I don't need to practice. I really needed to practice a whole lot more than I probably did. We get stuck in all sorts of other ruts. Whether they're related to family or work, or more importantly, that affects so many other folks, is the bigger ruts that we see that we get stuck in so many different places. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been watching, some of these things play out. The places where we are stuck in ruts, whether it's with things like gun violence and mental health, we're stuck in that rut. We're stuck in ruts of dealing with children who go to bed hungry every night, and yet on the other side of that, we deal with folks who are suffering from diabetes and from this obesity epidemic that's going on around us. We're stuck in ruts of what are world leaders or local leaders going to do next. We're stuck in ruts of what are we going to do with crumbling roads and bridges. We're stuck in ruts of anything. I mean, that list can go on and on and on. And all of those things share this characteristic of we've tried a whole bunch of things to try and fix them. We've even tried some of those things several times over. It's the very definition of being stuck in a rut when you're trying to do the same things to get out of the place where you're in over and over and over again. We're stuck. How do we get out of those places that we are stuck in? Well, we follow this example that Jesus gives us, but it's not an easy way of doing this. How we get out is, first thing we have to do is that we have to admit that we are in a rut. That's what the religious leaders and the legal experts didn't want to do. They didn't want to admit that they were stuck. Jesus is trying to force the issue on them, but they aren't ready to go and to get unstuck out of there. And because when you do that, then you've got to question the status quo. Because the way things have always been apparently isn't working, and now things have got to be different. You can't just do things the same way over and over and over again and expect to get out of that rut. That's just not the way that it works. And then you have to be willing to accept that change when it comes. This is what we see with those friends that brought their paralyzed friend to see Jesus. They weren't going to accept any sort of status quo of, well, he's paralyzed, he can't be healed. There's only one path for him going forward now. So they took him to see Jesus. They weren't going to accept that there was only one way to get into a building. That seems like a fairly big status quo thing to accept, that, there's only one way to get in. You come in through a door. Well, if you don't have a door and you can't get in through a window, even you go through a roof. Whatever works, they said, Jesus is here, let's come here. And then you got to share it with someone else, because we aren't the only ones that are stuck in those same ruts. As Jesus is teaching and preaching, then one of the things that he does is says, admit first that you're stuck someplace, that you are stuck in a rut. If you can do that, that's your first step in getting out of it, because you can't get out unless you can admit that there's something to get out of. And then he says, I'm going to show you a new path. But it's not going to look at all like what it is that has come before, because that's just not what he does. And so that means that you've got to accept the changes that are going to come. And quite honestly, 2 and 3 are the hardest things up there. To question the way things have always gone, and then to be willing to accept the changes that come because of it. When Jesus is speaking and guiding and leading us out of those places, that is so hard to do. So very difficult to do, to get out of those things. But then we've got to share it. Because that's how we don't just us get out of it, but that's how we produce real, long-lasting change. Sometimes it's just with one other person and as we make a change in our own lives, but sometimes we share that with a lot of other people so that we can make bigger changes that affect more people, that get more of us out of these ruts that we find ourselves in. As we prepare to go from here today, and I pick up my, you can only see one missed shot up here, so my only one missed shot that I had from today. We go, though, with this knowledge that Jesus is calling out to us. He calls out to us in lots and lots and lots of different places. Our trouble is not that Jesus isn't calling. Our trouble isn't that we need Jesus, because I've heard that one a lot over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, we need Jesus. I'll admit to that. Problem is, we got to hear Jesus also, and that's where we struggle, because he's going to lead us out, but we've got to be ready to do it and to hear it and to follow. Let us go and hear and do and follow, and then go and share that hearing and doing and following with the folks that are around us, so that more lives can be changed, and that love and that grace that comes from Jesus Christ can change the world around us. Let us go and do this in Christ's name. Amen.